So the people who study this kind of thing tell us that when you look at the metadata and you look at people who live to be 100 years old and they've got their marbles still and they're still active. In other words, when we say, do you want to live to be 100? A lot of people go, oh God, couldn't imagine that, be a vegetable. No, we're talking about being healthy, fit, and knowing who you are and knowing where you are and still enjoying life and be 100 years old. Those people have got lots of things in common, but one thing stands out more than anything else. In other words, yes, they have healthy diets. Yes, they are pretty active. Yes, they do things which are in the interest of staying healthy and alive and fit all the way through their lives. Basically, they don't retire. But the one big thing that all of them have, regardless of whether they're smokers or not, and some of them are, the one big thing they've all got in common is a large number of personal, warm relationships. And these relationships are essentially the kind of relationships that you would have with a close friend, except that they have quite a number of those sort of people in their life. In other words, these people come from community. They don't come from individuality. So one of the big issues in our life is separation. And it's pretty easy to do that with the internet and with people living in smaller and smaller groups. What we find is there is less of this interconnectedness, which is actually the key ingredient in living to be 100 and being glad that you're still alive. Now, these relationships, specifically, they are warm, they are caring, they show great levels of kindness, and they're deep, loving relationships. The kind of thing where, if your friend was in trouble, you would take their kids in for 6 months and those kids would live happily with you and you would parent them as if they were your own. That kind of level of closeness where we see each other on a regular basis. And most importantly, what happens is there's an exchange of heartfelt emotion. In other words, these people are very real with each other. So we're not talking about, being together and living to be 100 just because you know lots of people and you have superficial relationships. No, these are the relationships where you would lend these people money without a contract, knowing that if they couldn't get it back to you, it was because they didn't have it. But, ultimately you could trust these people with your life, with your money, with your kids, that kind of thing. What does that mean to you? Essentially, it means who matters to you and how many of them are there. So make yourself a list. It's really important to say, okay, who am I like that with and who do I want to be like that with? Because you see, one of your major projects in life is to go out there and find good people and draw them into your life. That simply means that you do things like, when you come across someone where there seems to be a bit of a spark, there's something that, there's maybe something in the conversation or whatever, well, you just organise for coffee and see what happens. And I suppose probably 90% of those coffees are only ever going to be one coffee because, the spark doesn't turn into a fire. But at some level, maybe 1 in every 5, 1 in every 3, 1 in every 10, and the numbers don't matter. Essentially, some of those relationships are going to go to the next level, and coffee's going to turn into dinner. Dinner's going to turn into a genuine, what in Australia we call mateship, where there's a kind of like, we just click. And it's your job to go out there and get as many of those people in your life as you can so that your life takes on a new dimension, a dimension that's kind of got a warmth and an extension to it. But here's the key ingredient. These relationships work on what I call being open and being vulnerable. You see, when I open up and I tell you the truth, when I share what is my truth, not expecting for you to agree with me, but we have a safe environment where I can share openly with you, just from the point of view of saying, well, this is where I'm at. I'm not asking you to agree, but as my friend, I want you to know where I'm at. When I can be open and I can be vulnerable, that's actually an act of love. So I'm extending this vulnerability and saying, do you want to step into this safe space with me? That's the key element of relationships that are sustaining and are warming. What does it take? Well, really only one key ingredient: courage. So have a look at that. Ask yourself, do I have the courage to step out there and risk more, better, open, warm relationships and I'll live longer and happier? Or do I lack the courage and I'll kind of stay here in my own little safe environment where I've kind of made it how I want? There's no real test and there's no real, impetus to do anything important, and I can kind of just stay comfortable and not get out of that comfort zone. So make a list of who's in that situation already. Who do you feel like that with? What have you got to do to make those relationships keep going? In other words, reaching out is probably the most important thing. Most of us are pretty responsive. In other words, we react rather than initiate. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that initiating is a key part of this opening up, being vulnerable, and broadening your horizons through people.